Today I've added a brand new Microtech to my knife collection. What's going on, everyone? Back with another episode of Stuff and Things. Last week we took a look at some brand new knives that were hitting the market, and today we're taking a look at a new knife to me. Not really new to the market. This knife has been out for years and years now. This one has been pretty elusive for me. Whenever they come in stock, they tend to sell out very quickly, and I was finally able to get my hands on one. So if you're into Microtech knives, nothing in this video is going to be new or groundbreaking, but I figured I would like to give you guys some of my thoughts on the Microtech SOCOM Elite. The SOCOM Elite comes in a ton of different varieties. This one happens to be a manual folding knife. They also have an auto variant, and this is the black clip point plain blade with the black aluminum handles. It has a closed length of a little over 5 inches, a blade length of a little over 4 inches, and an overall length of a little over 9 inches. So this is a very large knife. Again, this is a clip point Tonto blade, and it is coated in black. Or I should say the grinds, which happens to be a flat ground blade, is coated in black, and then the flats of the blade are actually ground down, giving it that dual tone look. The handles are made out of aluminum, and then on the show side of the knife they actually inlaid some sort of rubber texture in there to give you a little bit better of a grip. This SOCOM Elite has a stainless steel liner lock, which does have a little bit of adjustment to it. It's coming in at 5.6 ounces, so it's definitely on the heavier side for a folding knife. And then it also features a stainless steel tip down right carry only pocket clip, as well as a little glass breaker on the end. Alright guys, here we go, jumping right into the workbench top down view of this thing. This is a really good looking knife in my opinion. Obviously, everyone's opinion is going to vary when it comes to the aesthetics of a knife. However, you cannot argue the build quality of this knife, or really any Microtech for that matter. We'll start with the show side right here. All black hardware all throughout this thing, and then they have this rubberized texture sort of inlaid here into the aluminum handles. It's not the case for the pocket clip side, but for this side, it does make a lot of sense. You also have this little recessed groove in here, which is sort of dual purpose. You can slide your thumb down to that thumb stud, the action on this thing. We're going to talk about that for sure. And then when you grip this knife, my pointer finger falls right in that little groove, my thumb right up here on the top jimping, and then my fingers are actually contacting that rubber material in there. It feels really good. I've seen some long-term reviews of this knife, and this material looks great even after people are carrying these knives for years and years. This one has only been in my pocket for the past week now, but I wanted to bring you guys a review of it while my thoughts on it are still fresh. So, closing this knife up again, we have a little ball bearing glass breaker on there. So this knife is definitely falling into a tactical role. A lot of police, military, law enforcement type of agencies are probably choosing to carry this knife, and for a good reason, because this thing is built like a tank. Now, looking at it from the top view, the centering on this thing is perfect as expected. The blade is pretty thick, so it really fills up these handles quite nicely. You can see the swedge on the back there makes it a little bit thinner on the spine. And then over on the pocket clip side, we have some sort of like weird looking protrusions here, and that is for the liner lock on the inside. The liner lock is actually adjustable, so there are screws which we can take a look at, and they recess into this pocket here, and you can actually swap that thing out and move it completely if you choose to. We got a lanyard hole, which I don't really care about, and then pocket clip down here. Sort of a funky design, but it actually goes well with the knife. Not necessarily deep carry, but I have no issues with this pocket clip at all. The tension of it is spot on, not too strong that it's going to be ripping my pockets apart, and then of course it is smooth in there. So overall, pocket clip is pretty good in my opinion. Now if we look at the back of this knife, you'll notice some really good jimping up here on that thumb ramp. You have a little bit of texture here, and then some more jimping towards the bottom butt end of the knife. And if you take note, it's actually wider at the top here where your thumb rests, and then it sort of tapers down to the bottom point where you get that glass breaker on there. Really cool design for a knife. Not many knives are designed in this fashion, giving you a little bit more real estate up here, and that's something that I didn't even really notice at first, but the more I inspected this knife, the more I realized it was there, and I actually like it. So now, the action of this knife. I don't know if you guys can tell on video, but this thing just thunks open. No matter how you flick this thing out, it just has a really solid sound, really solid lockup. Here we have a little bit better of a look at that liner lock in there. This thing is adjustable, so you can sort of see the screws right about there. If I pull out my flashlight, we can probably see down in there a little bit better. The actual piece of the liner lock that is in contact with the tang of the blade is replaceable, so if you are really using this knife and carrying it for a long time in that lockup, right now it's pretty early, but if that lockup comes over to the center of the blade, or if it's just not looking right to you, you can actually replace that. I would assume they would use a harder steel in there. I'm not exactly sure what that little piece is made out of, but it's adjustable, so that is definitely a nice touch. This knife really screams longevity because of things like that. Now again, when I grip this thing in my hand, it fills up my hand very nicely. I typically wear a size large or even extra large gloves. A little bit more jimping there on the lock bar and then down here as well. Since this is sort of a tactical knife, the reverse grip feels really good as well. The jimping is just in the right places all over this knife, so if you are piercing, stabbing, or doing anything like that, it's definitely a great knife for that. Speaking of piercing and stabbing, the blade on here, dual texture and a big old billboard from Microtech on there. That's pretty typical for them. Not a huge fan of this, not gonna lie. Also not a huge fan of dual colors on a blade like that. However, the SOCOM Elite definitely makes up for it with just its overall robustness. So we have a clip point on here, Tonto style blade, and this thing comes extremely sharp. Now typically I don't really talk about how sharp knives are out of the box unless they are not adequate or if they are insanely sharp. This one is insanely sharp. I have been carrying and using this thing for the past week now, and as you can tell, there's not even any really like tape residue or anything on here. I've just been using it as an EDC knife while working on the van to sort of poke and pry at things, cutting zip ties, cardboard boxes, opening letters, stuff like that. Definitely overkill for an EDC knife from my perspective, but again, if you are in a role where you want a knife for self-defense and you just are into big, really well-built knives, then this is definitely up your alley. Now again, I don't really talk about sharpness very much, but here we can do a little bit of a cut test. Let's start with the actual tip. This thing is razor sharp. I'm really just using the weight of the blade to cut through there. Now what I like about Tonto points is this little secondary point right here. While it's not super pronounced, it's great for opening boxes. So I'm just gonna lay the blade down with the weight of the blade and the knife itself. Didn't cut all the way through there, but you can see this thing is insanely sharp. When a knife comes like this, right out of the box, you don't need to touch that edge up, and I probably will never sharpen this knife unless I start using it quite a lot. But yeah, this thing is very sharp. I do break down quite a lot of boxes in my normal life because I get so many packages, so some pretty thick cardboard there. Kind of hard to do in front of the camera, but it cuts right through this stuff like butter, and it really doesn't do anything to the blade. Now before we get into comparisons, the reason I chose the manual is because I've played with both the auto and the manual. Auto Microtechs are great as well. They have a really nice action to them. However, there's something about that thunk when you open this thing up that is just so satisfying. Even if you open the knife slowly, it still locks up great every time. Again, really early lockup on there. I wouldn't say this is the smoothest knife ever. It's not really gritty. I don't really know how to describe it, but it's not like insanely smooth. But again, this knife is only a week old, so once I start flicking this thing in and out a lot more, I guarantee you that is going to smooth out and it will sort of fall closed like that right there. Another thing to note is that the detent to keep this blade in here is very nice in the open position. You can actually see that little hole right there. So the detent is found down inside the knife here. It is pretty damn strong, but if you flick this thing really hard, you can actually open the knife like that too, if that's something that you're into. So let's get into some comparisons. Now I'm gonna start off with some knives that are just like standard everyday carry knives. However, this is really large, so a lot of these other knives are just gonna be used for a size comparison. Here we have Benchmade Bug Out. Just completely dwarfs the Bug Out. And then we have the Spyderco Para 3 Lightweight. Also just completely dwarfs this knife. However, if you have those, there you get an idea of how large this thing is. Now let's compare it to one of its own. Here I have the Microtech 25th anniversary blade that I picked up at Blade Show 2 years ago now, I believe. So here we're getting a little bit closer to the size, but obviously sort of apples to oranges with an out the front and just a manual folding knife. Now let's pull in some knives that are a little bit more common, but still not quite up to size of the SOCOM Elite. The Benchmade Freak right here, again, a big knife. I called this thing a really big knife in the video that I did of this, but as you can see, this thing is even bigger. We have the Spyderco Paramilitary 2, super iconic knife. Everyone has one of these in their collection, and we're getting closer in size, but overall, the SOCOM Elite is still a little bit bigger. And then we have one of my personal favorites, the ZT-0804CF. This thing is discontinued, but it's getting pretty close to the size there, a little bit longer. And then here's a new one that's in my collection. I haven't done a video on this or even shown you guys this, but this is Chris Reeve Sebenza 31 micarta. Sweet, sweet blade, and we're getting closer in size, but these are all still a little bit shorter in every way. So now let's get these out of the way and move into the knives that are a little bit more comparable in size. First up are these two blades right here, coming from Browse Blades. We have the Vendetta. This was a American run, I believe, out of 500. This is $4.99 out of 500. That thing is almost identical in size. Shape makes it look a little funky. Speaking of funky shape, we have the Echelon over here. Crazy, crazy design, and these are almost identical in size. I believe it's 9.11 inches overall length. Those two I've reviewed also, that I've reviewed on the channel in the past, the CRKT Seismic with that deadbolt lock. This is a huge knife. I slammed this thing into a tree and a log. Very large knife and very comparable in size to the SOCOM Elite. Probably one of my most watched knife reviews. Had to do that one off camera because it's the Paragon Warlock. Crazy mechanism on this one. Also very close in size. And then one that actually surprised me. This one, I don't think you guys have seen on my channel before either, but the Cold Steel Recon 1. Huge knife. It's got that triad lock on the rear there. This thing I've only carried for like a day or two just because it's so large. But as you can see, all pretty comparable in size there. Now, knife comparison wouldn't be complete without the grail of all knives, the Boker Mermaid. Oh, look at this thing. It just fits right in up against all these tactical black and gray blades. That thing's just right at home right there. So out of all of these, I think these two right here, very, very comparable. Mermaid's a little bit shorter, but it makes up for the short length with that majestic finish on there. But for real, SOCOM Elite, super solid blade. Not for everyone. Big, chunky, heavy knife. Great ergonomics. Super sharp right out of the box. Great, great blade coming from Microtech. So those are my thoughts on the Microtech SOCOM Elite. It is definitely an iconic knife in the Microtech collection, and it's not for everyone, but if you're into large tactical style blades, then this thing is definitely right up your alley. If you want any more information on this knife, I will leave some links in the description down below where you can possibly pick the knife up if it's ever in stock. And if you have any questions on it, let me know in the comments down below. Also, let me know what I should test out next. I'm definitely looking forward to the next knife to put in my pocket for a little bit more pocket time. A little bit of testing, a little bit of review. So let me know what you think my collection is missing. That's going to be all for today. If you are new to the channel, consider clicking subscribe. I make new videos every single week, and as always, thanks for watching. I'll talk to you in the next one.